today, which is just, there's the recording. Our agenda is just to review our bylaws changes and make recommendations. And so hopefully everyone got the document with the red line, and then I'll just throw it over to Jeff to kind of walk us through it, if that sounds okay.
Sure, that sounds good. And again, thanks Mike, Greg, Emily for being part of this bylaw committee. Again, I think it's important to have our bylaws up to date, but this should be a pretty simple process because Mike, as you've commented, the agency does keep them up to date. And I'll just add that I'm here. Dan Nelson, communications manager, is running Zoom upstairs and joined in the room here by Debbie Moody and Tiffany Flores, our record specialist. So the marked up bylaws that you've seen, staff, myself, other staff have looked at those. And so the red lines are our comments. We also shipped those over to Jeff Myers and his team, and Jakob on his team reviewed them and provided some comments on some of the specific issues that we had raised. I guess, again, in terms of readability, we had changed the shalls to will to make it kind of more in line with common, I think, language and how we typically speak to each other. So I guess I'll just, we can just kind of talk through these things. One thing I'll mention, I'd like to try to finish up by 9:45, just because we've got some transitions to the full board meeting, but maybe that won't be an issue. Maybe we'll be done plenty of time before that, but just wanted to put that out there. All right, so let's see. Dan, yeah, just kind of keep scrolling through, maybe to the first substantive. Yeah, again, I'll just shalls to wills. And by all means, jump in if anybody has any comments or questions. We were also, again, updating to clarify, just to bring it in line with current board practice in terms of our meetings, primarily remotely, but clarify that meetings are, folks are always welcome to attend and encouraged to attend here at the ORCAA office, but that we do meet primarily via video conference. Let's see. There was some language there about executive sessions and how, and again, that's based on a little bit of feedback we got from the state auditor's office during our last audit in end of 2022, just about how we were conducting executive sessions and just to have a little bit more discipline around coming out of executive sessions and things. So that language, that the new language captures that, our understanding.
Can I just say I told you so really quickly?
Tell Jim.
Sorry. I'll tell Jim, yes.
Let's see. Yep, again, just some language there. As I said, about updating the fact that we're mostly virtual, but that the board has said that getting together twice a year, at least twice a year in person, is a benefit. So again, it tried to capture that.
Can I ask one question on that line real quick?
Of course.
I mean, I think it's great to have field trips as part of it, but is it something, I don't know, it seems kind of milquetoast in that it doesn't insist on it. I don't know, it seems extra to talk about the field trips here, even though I think they're a great idea.
All right, so I guess your recommendation would be to strike, would basically be at least twice per year, to basically just take out that sentence.
I mean, it's not strong on it. I'm looking for things to change, I guess, too, but it seems extra and not helpful.
Okay. Other thoughts?
It does seem specific for bylaws.
Okay. All right.
Meaning that
I am looking at this, and we're changing all of the things that are expected norms from shall to will. So I am concerned that the word will in this is becoming more of a requirement. And when we're talking about these corresponding with a field trip, I would suggest using the word in-person board meetings may correspond with a field trip when possible. As opposed, because, you know, it really is not an expectation or a requirement for an in-person meeting to have it correspond with a field trip.
Okay.
So I think the word may might be more appropriate there.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is there's two options on the table. One, just take out this whole sentence, or if we decide we want to leave, that it's worth leaving something about a field trip, change the will to may. But
I'm comfortable with either. If
Me
we just
too.
want to change the will to may, that's fine.
Can we address Jeff's more fundamental question about, you know, changing all the shalls to wills and just, I mean, readability is one thing, but yeah, it's a requirement, right? If you make will, isn't shall a requirement too? I don't know the legal
Shall is
definition.
generally mandatory. Will is more directory and not as strong a term as shall. Shall is what courts generally understand more. In going from shall to will. It doesn't look to me like you are intending there be a lot of difference in the meaning. For example, in the one that is at the top of the screen, all meetings and hearings will be open to the public, as opposed to shall. That is a requirement of the Open Public Meetings Act and a requirement of the Clean Air Act for hearings. So it really doesn't have a difference in practical meaning.
so Dan was the one that suggested these changes. Dan, I don't know if you want to jump in and say something about your thinking on that.
Just I'm reading as a normal person, not a lawyer. And will and shall. Will is commonly used in common English. Shall is used nowhere but in legal documents. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if we want the lawyers to be able to read this and understand it, probably stick with shall. If we want the general public to read it and understand it, stick with will. That's my take.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I could go either way. I mean, again, just thinking about the audience for this document, this is essentially, it's a board document that describes to the board how the board works together, and certainly those outside, I mean, the public should obviously have access to it as well and see and use this to determine how the ORCAA board works. I don't have strong feelings. I'm fine keeping it as shall or with going to will. I really don't have strong feelings. I don't know, board members, do you have a preference since it's essentially your document?
If they're, go ahead.
I was just going to remind you that the standard or the norm now for writing for public is to write to at best the 8th grade reading level. I mean, that literally is the recommendation from most government agencies in US and Canada. It's from the PRSA, Public Relations Society. People's reading skills have diminished over the years. When I started here, I think it was writing to the 10th grade level, which was still fairly low, but writing to the 7th or 8th grade level. So we need junior high school kids to be able to understand our documents. That's just an aside.
Yeah, I'm pretty ambivalent on shall versus will. Usually the arguments that I see when people are looking at legal language is shall versus should. People want flexibility, so they go should. Other people don't want the flexibility, so they go to shall. I don't think there's really that big of a difference between shall and will. So I think we're making a cosmetic change, as Dan has pointed out, which might make the document more accessible, and that's fine.
Yep. Okay, well, not hearing any firm arguments against moving from shall to will. Let's keep let's convert the shalls to wills. And then in terms of this, and then I would suggest that we just change that will to may, keep that sentence, but just change the will to may.
I'm okay with those.
Agreed.
Okay,
Yeah, and since this is being recorded, the difference is will is directory and is expected to be followed, and may is more optional language.
all right, yeah, keep on scrolling. Let's see.
Ah, there's the typo that I wanted to point out. And number 9, any routine non-controversial issues, items.
Ah, yes.
Good catch.
Okay. So, yeah, so in number 11, I was important for me to change citizens because of course we invite any member of the public to attend, not just citizens.
I like it.
One thing that I might want to suggest putting into the public comment is that public comment can be on topics which are on the agenda as well as of germane to the board's functions.
Yes.
We may want to specify that the public comment should precede the board action on an agenda topic. We want to make sure that people have an opportunity to have public comment on things that are in the board. And I believe that was added to the OPMA last session.
And
Yeah,
it's really
our
common practice for a lot of different, agencies that public comment is, and most of the often it's spelled out in the bylaws that public comment period is the first agenda item.
After setting the agenda.
Right.
I mean, I guess I was agreeing with Jeff
Right.
that almost always, if there's action at this point, a brief public comment period is pretty standard, and I think it is new OPMA change.
And I've seen it done in two different ways. One is to have a public comment period first thing on the agenda. You can speak to anything that is going to come up later in the meeting, but it's all done during the public comment period. Or, and this is not my recommendation, when you get to each agenda topic, then you give the public an opportunity to comment on that particular item. I'd probably recommend doing it all at the beginning, because that way, when you get to the agenda topic, it's really the board's discussion on that topic, and you've already heard what public comments may or may not have been.
Dan, can you scroll up to the previous page where it has the regular order of business? So, wait, down. Okay,
Down.
down a little bit. Okay, wait, there. So order of business. So this is how we typically arrange things. So public comment is after the chair report. So
that covers it.
yeah, that's what I thought. Just making sure.
Or any other.
Should be for the agenda.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then, but I like your suggestion, Jeff, about perhaps in section 11 where it talks about public comment, about clarifying that public comment should be given on topics germane to the agenda and things.
On matters on the agenda or otherwise germane to its functions. That's where I would probably put it in at the end of line 2 in section 11.
Okay.
Where it says the word matters. Right after that, I would say matters on the agenda.
Okay.
Or otherwise.
Right, not just on the agenda, right, but explicitly mentioning that. We also don't mention written public comment here, but we do get it, and it's distributed to the board, right? Do we want to make a reference to written public comment?
certainly could. I mean, just to say that it's an that it basically that it's an option that the public can submit written comments to the board, to the agency.
You might put at the end of that, the public shall be afforded, or the public may submit written comments prior to the meeting. I'm wondering if if we want to have a time frame before that.
Yep.
Because normally you want them, if your meeting starts at 10, you want to give staff time to copy beforehand, and your meetings are at 10 o'clock. And I'm interested in Debbie's feeling about whether or not you want to say if an hour before the meeting is enough time to copy and distribute written comments.
I'll say that's not enough time for us to read it, even if it is enough time to distribute it. So I'd say,
Yeah.
you know, day before, you know, or end of the day, 2 days, 2 work days before or something.
I was thinking the other alternative is close of business the day before, so they can be distributed to the board, or at such other time specified by the board.
That was going to be my suggestion, and I think, again, this doesn't happen very often. I don't know how often we get written public comments, but I think explicitly saying that it's an option, and then perhaps if we determine that then we do start getting a lot of written comments and it's not enough time, we could always move it up to 2 days before or something. But I think in my mind, close of business the day before the meeting would work from staff's perspective.
Yeah, and I'd suggest putting that at the very end of that to address written public comments.
Okay. We can make that addition, make that change. And
always give yourself an out that as otherwise directed by the board.
Okay. Right. Great. Okay. Few minor changes there. So the next, I think, substantive things, the things we wanted to discuss related to the minutes and the record, and this is something that we specifically asked Jeff and his team. Because of course, since we've been meeting remotely, it's a lot harder to get signatures. And so what Jakob said is that in terms of the minutes, that those should be, can be signed by the staff preparing the minutes, and then executive director can also kind of verify, can sign. And that's relatively easy to do. The little bit harder thing, but still very doable, is but when we have formal resolutions, motions, formal resolutions, that needs at least 3 board member signatures. And so what seems like we should probably do here is figure out either using Adobe or DocuSign or some electronic signature method of collecting maybe the chair, the vice chair, and another board member's signature on board resolutions.
Have we tried electronic signatures yet and struggled to get the full board to sign them?
No, I don't think we've tried. No, we haven't done anything. But we don't, so ORCAA, because we're still primarily a paper-based organization, and because we're, in terms of a lot of the documents that we receive, the permits, the emissions inventory, other information has to have a wet signature. We just haven't we haven't done a lot with electronic signature. So I don't think we have, well, I know we don't have a DocuSign. We don't have DocuSign, or I don't think we've used the formal electronic signature aspect of Adobe. But so I'd suggest that we do that, and that we then perhaps from now on, after resolutions, we get board signatures on those.
Can we use electronic signatures on a document that required wet signatures from the applicant or whomever?
I think that's a complicated, so my understanding is that no, that if it's a wet signature, it's a wet signature. Jeff, maybe you can, I know that the EPA for emissions inventories, for instance, from our Title V sources, those have to come in with the wet signature. But I'm not sure.
I believe that you can use electronic signatures. I'm not sure that with regard to Title V or the EPA requirements, but generally speaking, legal documents can be executed with electronic signatures. And when we say that minutes shall be signed by the executive director or resolutions shall be signed by whomever we say has to sign them, typically I think you can do that by electronic signature, and this language doesn't specify what type of signature.
Emily has their hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So we actually just went through this process yesterday with the Board of Health regarding switching to electronic signatures, and we all had to sign an electronic signature policy document. So we might either need or want to come up with a policy for electronic signatures, basically stating that we won't use it for anything but the intended purposes. Because some people are, a little bit more cautious about just handing over their signature. That came up last night at the Board of Health, so I thought I'd throw that out there. And I'd be happy to get like a draft of that policy together unless staff want to do that, but I would also volunteer to provide a policy if we want one.
That would be great, Emily. If you could share that with me and Debbie, that would be fantastic. And we'll take a look.
I think that's a really good idea to have that kind of policy, to make sure that that signature cannot be placed on any document except at the express direction of the person whose signature is being affixed. That way, if Debbie puts the electronic signature on a document, she has done so at the express direction of that person.
Right.
And typically I would want to avoid having somebody else put somebody's signature on a document. So that's, I think, something that could be addressed in that kind of policy.
Right. Yeah. Who's authorized to do that? And then, I mean, in my mind, there's a couple different ways of doing electronic signature. I mean, I've got a little image file of my signature that Debbie sometimes uses to put on documents, on letters and things. But then there's also the more formal process where using either DocuSign or Adobe. I know Adobe has a way of doing it where you have to verify your identity, sign into DocuSign or whatever. And so that's kind of a more formal way of doing it.
Yeah, and the policy could identify which we would use.
Right. Okay. Do you have preferences over which of those two? Would you want to see us using something more formal like DocuSign, or would you be just as happy with Debbie having image files of board member signatures that then she uses as spelled out by the policy document?
I don't have a problem with it as long as it's spelled out in the policy. We actually in the legal world have a court rule that allows us to affix a signature, which is a digital image of, or an image of our actual signature when we're signing legal pleadings. So,
Okay.
and I prefer that to something like /s/ and then your name, which anybody could type.
Emily, it looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff for a couple reasons, but I think that I would personally prefer just like submitting to Debbie my electronic signature and then having her slap it on whenever I've given consent, because personally, like my email inbox gets flooded and I would hate to hold something up because I take a couple days to find the email. So I'd be happy with that as well, as long as it's spelled out in the policy.
Okay.
And then I have another question regarding that. Would it be complicated? I mean, like, if it comes up where someone is like, hey, I'm really cautious about my signature, I'd really rather do DocuSign. Could we spell it out in the policy that, like, if the document isn't like returned within a certain amount of time, then ORCAA is permitted to use the signature as long as they've given consent to use it? Or would that be too complicated to like have, okay, like 6 people just put their electronic signature on there and then like 2 people really want DocuSign? Would that just make it more complicated than it needs to be?
I think the policy should give the option of using DocuSign if the individual prefers that.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
And we can kind of take a look at the logistics of then how that would work, and try to figure that out, but that's probably something that we can figure out. So, okay, well, we'll take, so Emily, please do share the draft Thurston County or the Thurston County policy. We'll take a look at that, and put something from ORCAA together, that then can go along with this, bylaw update.
And did we want to make a decision on the minutes being signed by the executive director rather than the board, or did I kind of, we talked a lot about the electronic signatures, but
Yeah, so I don't have a feeling either way. I mean, again, and if we're working on the electronic or developing an electronic signature path, then probably it makes sense for maybe the board chair or to have board signatures on it. I don't know what's.
I think it's helpful to have an attestation that it's been approved by the board. That's the
Yeah.
more important thing in my mind than whether the board signs it. But when they are adopted by the board, that there is an attestation, perhaps by the secretary of the board or the executive director, that attests that those have been approved by the board.
We don't have a secretary. I guess I'd rather just say, let's keep it going. We're trying to fix our signature problem. So I guess why solve it 3 different ways would be my.
yeah, that makes
Keeping
sense.
it simple.
Okay. So then what I'm understanding, so then we, since we're figuring out an electronic signature path, we'll work, so, yeah, actually, I'm a little confused. We'll, how do we want to handle the minutes, so that those should be approved, also a signature of maybe the board chair or vice chair?
Well,
Or-
the language that you've got there says they'll be signed by the executive director when prepared. So those are the draft minutes. And then validated by the signature of the chair when it's approved. That shows that it has been approved when the chair signs off on it. I think that is an appropriate procedure.
And I think we were saying keep that as is
Yeah.
and then work on the electronic signature piece.
I wasn't quite saying that. I was saying we don't need to talk about it at all, but I'm fine with that as long as we have the board chair sign it at the end. I mean, do we really need to have the executive director sign a draft? I mean, that's new and seems extra. I mean, that's not a standard in any other board that I'm in, I mean.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it.
Do we want to say minutes shall be prepared by the executive director? I mean, is that who is actually preparing the minutes?
no, they're prepared, well, so how we
They're
work.
prepared by
is
staff.
Prepared by Debbie, and then I review them and make edits and additions, and then sometimes other staff also weigh in on things, but yeah, prepared by staff. And that's what then gets attached in the board packets for board approval, every month.
You might want to say, if you want to eliminate that first signature for the executive director, just say minutes shall be prepared by the executive director or designee, and validated by signature of the chair when approved by the board. That way you have the signature, only one signature, and it's the chair when it's approved.
Okay,
So the director wouldn't sign it all. Just FYI, this is not.
It wouldn't need to be a formal signature by the executive director. But the practice of having staff prepare them and having the executive director read them and approve them for consideration by the board is consistent with that language, that it's prepared by the executive director and validated by the signature of the chair.
Okay,
You could also use the word attested by the signature of the chair. Either validated or attested is the same thing.
okay.
Not sure if I ever used a attested in 8th grade.
I was thinking the same thing, Greg. So I think we'll,
I was gonna say the same thing.
all right, well, I think we've got what we need on that. Got the path forward, all right, so I think that's it. Again, a little bit of language with there, but any other questions or comments that came up as you were reading this, or things that you've seen maybe in bylaws of other agencies that you're associated with that think would be helpful to see in here?
Nothing for me.
All looks good to me.
Okay. Great, well, then we can work on making those updates. I'm not sure, and I know our July meeting is coming up in in a month. And in terms of, not sure how much work is gonna be needed to be done on the policy. I think it would be helpful to move the bylaws forward at the same time we have electronic signature policy. So what we can do is in the coming weeks, kind of work to see if we would be ready to take this to the full board in July, or it might be that would be in September. Because again, we're skipping August. So, but again, I don't see a huge hurry. These are all fairly cosmetic updates to the bylaws. So are you okay with us kind of seeing what we can do? If we're ready to bring it to the full board in July, we'll do so. If not, to defer it to September.
I
Sounds
saw
good to
three
me.
thumbs up.
Great. Okay.
And Jeff, did you get
Oh.
my note that I shall miss the ORCAA meeting today?
Yes, yes. Oh, actually, yes, I did. And there was one other thing. I know we're relatively got a few minutes left. We also attached, or was included in the board packet, the board member handbook, because that is referenced in the bylaws. And so wanted to make sure, see if there was any input. I know Mike and Emily recently rotated onto the ORCAA board, and so maybe have some thoughts on something else. So Dan, can you bring that up really quick and specifically show the table of contents, so we can just take a quick look at that? Yeah, again, I just wanted to make sure that that has what you all feel like you needed to come up to speed on ORCAA and the work we do in order to enable you to be an effective board member. And can you show that table of contents? Because it's going to take you forever to scroll through it. I would rather, yeah, if you can bring up the table of contents.
So this is the PDF. That was
Yeah,
sent.
but there's
Oh.
there should be a table of contents in the PDF. I mean, a way to, yeah, that will show it in the sidebar.
This is the attachment that was with the board packet.
Yeah.
Let me pull up, I mean, in my screen, there is you click over on the left side, on the, yeah, click all tools. I don't know, Mac is different. So I don't know how it, but in any event, so maybe it doesn't work in a Mac, on a Mac. So that there's a few pages of this kind of overall overview of ORCAA. There's the bylaws, there's an ORCAA org chart. there's ORCAA acronyms, there's some focus sheets. So anyway, if you would just give us some thought and feedback, if there's additional things that you would like to see in this, or if there's extraneous things that you think maybe we shouldn't include in here, that would be helpful feedback as well.
It's good for me. Something I've actually seen, not in the handbook, and I didn't review it closely, but I will and see if I notice anything else. But I really like an acronym list as like an extra page on the back of an agenda, just as an automatic thing that's there, because especially with newer members, and they're not pulling out their handbook every time they're
Yes.
sitting through a meeting, but they're like, what's an NOV? What's an NOC? So having
Right.
those as accessible as possible, if we're not printing out, 30 agendas, I think is helpful
Okay.
with the alphabet soup sort of organization.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We can try to think about, maybe just we attach that as kind of a standard part of the board packet, just so that you've got easy access to the agenda or to the acronym list, and we can kind of think through, make sure, I don't know, it might be a while since we've looked at this to make sure it's complete, or relatively complete.
Might want to have toxic air pollutant on there as well.
TAPS versus HAPS.
Yeah, because air toxics is kind of what I normally would refer to that. And
Well, and it's so the state refers to toxic air pollutants or TAPs, whereas the feds refer to hazardous air pollutants or HAPs. And while there's overlap, it's not
crystal clear.
some things are HAPs but not TAPs, and some things are TAPs but not HAPs.
Hey,
Okay.
I gotta sign off, guys, but I will
Yes.
I'm sorry to miss the meeting today. Mike, are you missing the meeting too? Are you going to the interview for OLCAP?
Oh, is that why you're missing it? No, I was gonna go to the Friday interview.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. You've been more involved in the process, but yeah, I feel like I want to see them both. So
No, that's a good idea.
okay.
Okay.
Well, I gotta go set up for that. So again, sorry to miss it, and see you guys later.
Okay, thanks, Greg. We'll see you
Yeah.
next week. Okay, well, I feel like we've got some next steps.
Okay.
So, Mike, can you give just kind of an overview of this, of what we got done? I'm assuming during the chair report. I'll mention I'll look over to Jim. I think Jim's gonna be here in the room in person, so I can make sure he looks to you for the to give an update from the bylaw committee during the chair report. Okay.
All right. So is the board meeting in this Zoom room?
Yes, I believe it's the same link, correct, Dan?
Yes.
You mind if I just hang out and mute and
Yep, please do. Okay, so I think the meeting is concluded.
Thank you. See you in 15 minutes.